It started on a quiet Monday morning, the kind of day where nothing should go wrong. Clear skies, a fresh cup of coffee in hand, and a to-do list filled with simple yard work. But in suburbia, peace doesn't last long when someone like Karen rolls into the neighborhood. Now, this isn't your average neighbor conflict. I live on a narrow cul-de-sac where every house has its own driveway and every inch of curb matters. We've all got our routines, our spaces, and an unspoken rule of respect, especially when it comes to driveways. But Karen, she drove a brand new white BMW X5 like she bought the whole block with it. Her first offense was almost subtle blocking just half of my driveway while she ran in to drop off something for her cousin, who had just moved in 3 houses down, but then just 5 minutes turned into 30. I couldn't get my truck out to go to work. I had to cancel a drywall delivery because her luxury SUV was pinning me in. No note, no apology. Just that sleek BMW glinting in the sun like it was entitled to its own zip code. I figured it was a one-off. People move. Stress happens. I get it. So the next time I saw her, I waved and tried to introduce myself. But before I could even get a sentence out, she popped her sunglasses down over her eyes and said, "I'm really not interested in neighborhood politics," and walked away like she was storming off the red carpet. Alright, message received. But then it got worse. This wasn't a one-time issue. Karen began showing up every other day blocking my driveway while visiting her cousin. Sometimes she'd sit in the car on her phone, other times she'd park and disappear for hours. I left polite notes. I knocked on the cousin's door. I even asked my neighbor across the street if he knew what her deal was. His answer, "That's Karen, she thinks the world parks around her." Still, I didn't want to escalate. I'm not some HOA enforcer or angry neighborhood watch guy. I'm just a contractor with bills to pay and a schedule to keep. But when you've had 3 days in 1 week where you can leave your house because of the same car, patience wears thin. The final straw came on a Friday. I had a landscaping team coming in to redo the front yard. I posted signs. I left cones. I even texted the cousin a heads up, asking them not to have guests over that day because I needed full access to the driveway. I got a thumbs up emoji back. All good, right? Wrong. At exactly 8:07 a.m., the BMW pulled up like clockwork right through the cones and parked completely across my driveway. Karen stepped out in designer sunglasses and a yoga mat slung over her shoulder. She glanced at the cones, shrugged, and muttered, "Not my problem," before strutting off toward her cousin's house. The landscaping crew showed up 10 minutes later, and guess what? They couldn't park their equipment. They couldn't unload soil. We were stuck. Again, so I did what any sane person would do. I walked down to her cousin's house and knocked politely, firmly. Her cousin opened the door halfway and sheepishly said, "Karen's not here." She left. That S when I noticed Karen's purse and keys sitting on the kitchen island behind her. So, she left to protect Karen. That's when I knew we weren't dealing with miscommunication anymore. This was willful. This was someone who genuinely thought the rules didn't apply to her. The question wasn't if Karen would face consequences, it was how. And trust me, karma was already pulling into the driveway. I'd love to tell you that Karen saw the frustration in our faces, noticed the delay she caused the landscaping crew, and apologized, maybe even offered to move her car, but no. That's not the Karen way. Later that day, around noon, I heard the heavy purr of that BMW rolling back. I stepped outside hoping, maybe praying, that she was there to explain herself. But she barely looked at me. Instead, she parked in the same spot again completely across my driveway and stepped out like she hadn't ruined the morning. I said, as evenly as I could, "You know you blocked my crew from working today, right?" Her response, a raised eyebrow and a smug smirk. "Maybe you should schedule your little workers on a day." "I'm not busy, little workers." I blinked, unsure if I'd just heard her right. She adjusted her designer yoga top like she was starring in her own reality show and said, "Besides, I don't live here, so I'm not technically breaking any rules. This is street parking." "You're not parked on the street," I snapped. "You're across my driveway. On my private property." Karen gave a sarcastic pout. "Then call the police. Let's see if they care." And just like that, she walked off again, head held high, ponytail bouncing like her ego needed its own leash. I stood there stunned. I'd dealt with stubborn people before, but this was calculated entitlement. She knew what she was doing, and worse, she enjoyed it. So I did exactly what she dared me to do. I called the local non-emergency line and reported an illegal obstruction. The dispatcher said they'd send someone by when available, which in small-town terms means sometime between now and next week. So instead of waiting, I got creative. I placed cones again. I put up to fresh signs, bold letters. Private driveway do not block. Vehicles will be towed. And just for good measure, I borrowed a friend's reflective vest and stood at the end of my driveway the next morning, making sure no one could accidentally confuse it for a public space. But Karen was like clockwork. The next morning at 8:03 a.m., she pulled up, ignored the cones, drove past the signs, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're really trying too hard for someone who doesn't matter." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just pure Karen energy straight from the HOA entitlement handbook. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. Because this wasn't going to be solved with arguing. I needed receipts. I needed proof. So I installed a motion-activated dash cam in my truck facing the driveway. And another camera on the front porch pointing directly at the spot she always parked. Every time she showed up, I recorded it. Every time she ignored signage, cones, or blocked my contractors, I had it on video. Within 4 days, I had 7 separate incidents recorded, or timestamped, or showing her ignoring warnings. One even caught her cousin laughing from the window while Karen blocked me in, and it wasn't just me anymore. My next-door neighbor, Lindan, elderly woman who needed regular medical checkups, texted me saying Karen had blocked her nurse's car from parking in front of her house. "I thought it was just you. She was doing this too," Linda wrote. "She told me to park somewhere else or reschedule my nurse." That did it. Now it was affecting more than my schedule. It was interfering with someone's healthcare. I printed out the footage, put together a neat little timeline, added pictures, text messages from neighbors, and even screenshots from my security cameras. Then I marched that entire packet down to City Hall and filed a formal nuisance and obstruction complaint against both Karen and the property owner. The clerk at City Hall reviewed the packet and actually paused. "Wait, is this that white BMW that keeps getting complaints?" Apparently I wasn't the first, but I would be the last. Because what Karen didn't know was that her cousin's rental property had multiple warnings on file already. Complaints for trash violations, loud parties, and now this. Driveway obstruction and verbal harassment. The city official promised to investigate immediately. I walked out with a formal case number and something even better. But while I waited for the city to respond, Karen returned with new energy. She didn't just block the driveway that afternoon. She double parked, left her car in front of my driveway and part of my neighbor's, then went inside for 2 hours. That's when I decided it was time. Not for more warnings, not for more signs, but for action. And let me tell you, Karen was about to learn what it really meant when karma hits hard. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious, but because I knew the next day would mark the end of Karen's free parking days. And frankly, I was looking forward to it. By 7:30 a.m., I had my coffee brewed, my phone charged, and my outdoor camera feeds live on my tablet. I was sitting on my porch like a hunter waiting in a blind, and like clockwork, 8:01 a.m., the familiar growl of that overpriced white BMW rolled into view. Karen, same routine, same smug face. She didn't even pretend to look at the new signage ID. Added this one with bold red text that read, "Trespassers will be towed immediately, no warnings given." She parked, popped her sunglasses on, and strutted down the sidewalk like she owned the entire block. But here's what she didn't know. The towing company I'd called the night before. They were already circling the block. I'd shown them all the video proof, filled out the authorization forms, and signed the private property agreement. The dispatcher even laughed and said, "Oh, we love these HOA types. Let's get that cargo." Within 5 minutes, the tow truck had her BMW lifted. It was smooth, surgical. They knew what they were doing. Hydraulic arms extended, rear tires lifted, and just like that, her pristine status symbol was off the pavement and inching down the road. I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat, I just filmed. For documentation and maybe a little personal satisfaction. Roughly 15 minutes later, the storm came barreling back up the street. Karen, she was practically foaming at the mouth. The second she saw the empty space where her car had been, her head snapped toward my house like it was a heat-seeking missile. "You had my BMW towed." Her voice carried down the whole street. Curtains moved. Lawn mowers paused. Even my neighbor's golden retriever sat up straighter. I calmly stood up, held out my phone, and said, "You were warned." 7 times. On camera. With signs. "You've blocked access to my driveway, my deliveries, and now even a medical nurse's visit." Karen's mouth hung open, stunned for half a beat. "That's private property towing. It's illegal." "Actually, it's not," I replied. "It's legal under City Code 6-12. Subsection C. Paragraph 2. Vehicles obstructing private access points can be removed without notice if clear signage is posted. And, Karen, we've got 3. You could almost hear the gears grinding in her head. I'll call the cops. You're going to jail. Please do, I said, stepping aside to reveal the live security camera feed mounted above the garage. They'll love seeing the footage of you trespassing, blocking emergency access, and laughing about it. Want me to send it over now, or later? She paused again, but I could tell she wasn't done. Karen never backs down on the first loss. She stormed off, slamming her cousin's front door like it owed her money. I figured she'd cool down, maybe pay the impound fee and move on wrong. Later that afternoon, she came back. This time, no BMW, just Karen, and a clipboard. She was filing a complaint with our neighborhood HOA, the same HOA she didn't even belong to. Her cousin's property was a short-term rental and legally not under our HOA's jurisdiction, but logic had left the building. According to my neighbor Linda, who was on the HOA board, Karen had demanded they fine me for intimidation, harassment, and unjust property obstruction. Linda nearly choked laughing. She thought we were going to fine you, the guy who documented everything and handled this legally. She's delusional. What Karen didn't expect was that our HOA board, mostly made up of retired professionals, who had zero tolerance for people like her, was already aware of her nonsense. Apparently, complaints about her behavior had come from 3 different households in the last 2 weeks. Linda sent me a message. Just FYI, we've filed a joint nuisance report against her and her cousin with the city. We're backing you up 100%. Let us know if she retaliates. But Karen did retaliate. The next morning, around 6 a.m., my front yard was littered with trash bags. Not the kind that blow in by accident. These were intentionally dumped. Empty Starbucks cups, used takeout boxes, even some garden soil spilled from one of the bags. And on the side of my mailbox, a smudged red lipstick mark that read, "Not over." She thought this was a war, so I treated it like one. I filed a police report, again this time for targeted harassment and illegal dumping. But I also added one more little detail. I reviewed my security camera footage from the night before, and guess who appeared, walking down the sidewalk with a duffel bag around 2:48 a.m. Karen, caught on 3 angles. I handed over the footage. The officer didn't say much, but I could tell from his raised eyebrow that this was escalating beyond HOA drama. He just nodded and said, "We'll take it from here." And they did. Because the very next day, Karen's cousin's house got a surprise inspection. What Karen didn't know was about to ruin both of them. When I saw the city code enforcement vehicle pull up in front of the cousin's house, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. Karen had been escalating, but now, so was everyone else. The officer stepped out, clipboard in hand, along with a city inspector. They didn't even knock at first. Just started circling the exterior, snapping photos, writing notes. A few minutes later, they knocked firmly, waited, and when no one answered, they left a bright orange violation notice taped to the front window in plain sight. Curiosity got the better of me, so I walked over when they left. In bold black font, it read, "Notice of unauthorized rental activity. Immediate action required." That was the first crack in Karen's fortress. You see, her cousin had never registered the property as a short-term rental, which, in our city, was a big no. There were zoning restrictions, health inspections, occupancy limits, none of which were followed. Karen had been essentially managing the place like it was hers, subletting illegally while treating the entire street like her personal runway. I didn't have to lift a finger. Karma was doing all the heavy lifting now. Later that evening, Karen came marching back, her arms crossed, a storm cloud on her face, and absolutely no BMW in sight. I was watering my lawn, acting casual, but I saw the way she zeroed in on me like a missile. She stood right at the edge of my driveway and said, "You think this is over? You're harassing me. This is my family's property." I didn't flinch. The law says otherwise. Maybe you should look it up instead of violating it. That's when she lost it. "You're a narcissist. You don't even live in this neighborhood." I cut her off. "I own this house. I've lived here for 7 years, and I pay taxes. You've been crashing here for a month, treating everyone like dirt," she sneered. "You'll regret this." It was almost comical now, the irony of that statement, because 2 days later, she finally did. Apparently, the city's inspection triggered a full audit. Someone must have tipped them off, maybe even another neighbor, because a second violation notice appeared. This time, it wasn't just about zoning. It was operating an unlicensed business, exceeding guest occupancy, blocking residential easements, and illegal waste disposal. That trash she dumped on my lawn. It was traced back to the house, thanks to a torn packing slip with her cousin's name on it. And just like that, the house was under active investigation. Then came the real kicker. One of the neighbors across the street, a quiet older gentleman no one ever heard much from, turned out to be a retired real estate attorney. And he filed a civil complaint because Karen's guests had been using his driveway too, even his lawn. Once, a kid had trampled through his garden trying to chase a football, so now there were 3 separate cases open against the cousin's house. One from the city, one from the HOA's complaint board, and one civil action. Karen wasn't just dealing with me anymore. She was dealing with the entire neighborhood. You could feel the shift in the air. For weeks, she strutted around like she owned every square inch. Now, she was keeping her head down, darting from her car to the front door, sunglasses on, hood up. No more power walks, no more passive-aggressive muttering. But it wasn't over yet. I'd just come back from work when I saw flashing lights outside. Not an ambulance, not a fire truck, a sheriff's cruiser. I walked out to find Karen in full meltdown mode, shouting at the officer about targeted harassment and illegal recordings. Her cousin stood nearby, nervously wringing his hands. The officer turned and saw me. "You're the homeowner that filed the towing report?" he asked. "Yes, sir," he nodded. "We've reviewed all the footage. You're in the clear." But he gestured at Karen. "Just admitted on record to dumping waste on your property and keying another neighbor's car last week." I raised an eyebrow. "Wait, keying a car?" Karen turned pale. Her cousin whispered, "Oh my God," under his breath. Turns out, Karen had taken her revenge a step further and keyed the attorney neighbor's Tesla. And that was caught on his security camera, too. That was it. The sheriff officer placed her under temporary detainment for property damage and mischief while they reviewed the charges. She wasn't cuffed. Not yet, but she was taken into the cruiser, shouting the whole way about lawsuits and her rights being violated. Her cousin, he just stood there, embarrassed, silent, completely deflated. By the time she came back that evening, released, but warned, she didn't say a word. She packed her things into a small rental car and left. Not just the street, the city. No final confrontation, no apology, no dramatic goodbye. Just silence and peace. I stood on my porch again, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, and watched as that beat-up red Toyota rental turned the corner. Funny how poetic justice works, especially when you don't have to shout, fight, or scream to get it. All you need is a camera, the law, and the patience to let karma do the rest. The street felt different after she left. For the first time in weeks, I heard birds again instead of yelling. Kids started riding their bikes down the sidewalk like they used to. The lawyer across the street smiled at me and raised his morning paper like a gentleman from another era. One neighbor even baked me cookies and dropped them off with a note. "Thanks for standing up for all of us." It was surreal, like the block had collectively exhaled. But Karen, she wasn't quite done. Because, as it turns out, her cousin still owned the house, and while he clearly wanted nothing more to do with the drama, Karen had left something behind, a mess, not just emotionally, but physically. The yard looked like a jungle. Garbage still filled the bins. Furniture was half broken on the patio. And worst of all, she'd run up nearly $2,800 in city fines tied to illegal rentals, vandalism, and multiple nuisance violations. Guess whose name all that was tied to? Yup, the cousin. He showed up a week later with a moving van and an exhausted expression. When I greeted him cautiously, he sighed and said, "Look, man, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. I let her stay here for a few weeks while I was traveling. I didn't know she was turning the place into a circus." He offered me his number. "If anything else happens, call me. I've filed a no-contact order. I'm trying to sell this place now." To his credit, he cleaned up most of the mess. He even hired landscapers and paid off the outstanding HOA fines. Quietly, without a single complaint. But the most satisfying part, Karen had left behind her infamous white BMW. The very one she used to block driveways like a queen ruling over peasant land. The cousin told me she left it here when she stormed off. I asked her to pick it up. She said, "Not my problem." Oh, the irony. The very words she had said to me, "Not my problem," were now coming back like a boomerang. The cousin had enough. After 2 ignored calls and 1 certified letter that went unclear, he called a local towing company and had the car impounded. It was towed out of the driveway, just like my car had been blocked in weeks ago. I couldn't resist. I stood on the porch again with my morning coffee and took a picture. No smugness, no gloating, just poetic closure. That photo, It eventually made its way to a private neighborhood group, and let us just say it became the unofficial wallpaper of sweet justice. As the months passed, the house sold. A young couple with a toddler moved in. They repainted the porch, planted hydrangeas, and waved every morning as they walked their golden retriever. The block was back to normal. But Karen Reese, on the local news, not in handcuffs, but close. A segment aired about disruptive vacation rentals and unauthorized Airbnb managers. Guess who the camera crew caught arguing in the background during a council meeting? Karen, red-faced and furious, blaming entitled neighbors and corrupt city policies for her ruined income stream. Her new nickname, Airbnb Karen. One of the reporters even used a clip from her infamous meltdown caught on my doorbell camera. You know, the one where she screamed, "Not my problem," when told she was illegally blocking a homeowner's driveway. She tried to sue the station for unauthorized usage. She lost. Turns out, when you go on a public sidewalk and start yelling in front of someone else's home, you lose your right to privacy real fast. That segment aired statewide. By the time it ended, the anchor literally said, well, lesson learned. If you're going to block someone's driveway, make sure they don't have a camera or a legal backbone. I couldn't have said it better myself. In the end, Karen moved to counties over. Rumor has it she tried running another short-term rental and got booted again after clashing with that HOA too. Some people never change. But here, peace was restored. Neighborhood potlucks returned. Kids played freely again. And as for me, let's just say I installed a second security camera. Not out of fear, but as a reminder that standing your ground, using the law, and keeping your cool does work. Because instant karma isn't just satisfying, it's sometimes the best viral revenge of all.